You're streaming. Yeah.
Can you guys hear me? Hey, this thing works. Cool. So I'm going to sit down for this first half. By the way, my name is Jeremiah Telemontis. Talk a little bit about hardware botnets from Emergence Security. Whoops. Having a little technical difficulty, so we'll try to get through that. So the topic of the discussion again is hardware botnets. And what I wanted to do is just kind of focus a little bit about the impact of small computer, small SPCs, kind of how they have their security impact on business. So imagine, if you will, a botnet that is very small and expensive. There are some super cheap SBCs on the market. There's a $9. I don't know if anyone's ever seen this. A $9. Did you see that? $9 chip. I think it's on Kickstarter. It's something crazy. They were looking for $50,000 funding, but ended up getting over $1 million. Anyway, so stuff like that. Just what's the impact on security? What would that, what kind of impact would that be? Bots that might be physically placed inside or nearby the target location. A botnet that can be controlled via some sort of GUI and do very many of the same things that they do, perhaps even over Tor. A botnet that doesn't require some level of system compromisation, right, in order to grow. One that doesn't need to evade antivirus, OS controls, right, hits, those kinds of things. Something that can propagate malware, something that can run malware, shells, exploits, Perl, Python scripts, many things like that, even nmap and those kinds of Metasploit, right, those kinds of security tools. So really the subject of my talk is really going to kind of cover this basic abstract of kind of, what's the security impact of these cheap SBCs, kind of explore this hardware botnet concept and what are the characteristics that make that up. Discuss the project that I've been working on, which is the PlugBot project, which is what we're calling a hardware botnet research platform, and kind of experimentation with that as well. Agenda, really just a couple of main components, just brief introduction, talk a little bit more about the concept, a little bit more about the makeup and sort of the limitations, because there certainly are limitations with this concept. And then I'm going to get into a little bit more of the demo. We'll take a look at the PlugBot software and play around with it a little bit. So a little bit about me, founder of Red Team Security, flew in from Minneapolis yesterday, and very happy to be here. I ended up having a kidney stone on the way down on the airport, actually on the plane, and it was terrible. So I think Nitro was in the hospital, and might still be in the hospital. I went straight from the airport, got in an ambulance, and went to the hospital, and man, that's some kind of pain I don't wish on anyone, but I'm glad to be here, and it was amazing. What's that? No, not that. I hope not. Hopefully he's much better, but thankfully all is well today. So I've also, so in addition to working for Red Team, I'm consultant, obviously, doing a lot of work for a number of the different organizations, some very large, some very small. I was fortunate enough to work for Wells Fargo during the time I consulted, during the time of the Zeus Trojan botnet that was really making headlines and causing quite a stir. So I was fortunate enough to work with them and trying to develop some level of remediation, sort of mitigation opportunities before there was really time to develop any sort of commercial solution or implement a commercial solution. So that was real fortunate to get that exposure. I do enjoy security research in the time that I do have available. Just like to do lots of stuff. I wrote a book called Social Engineer's Playbook. It's on Amazon if you want to check that out. I know we don't have much time, so I'm just going to kind of breeze through these a little bit, try and get to the demo portion. So I think we're mostly familiar with the terms. SBC being, things like Raspberry Pi. QBox is another one that I haven't yet played with, but the chip is something I do want to get my hands on. A little bit about traditional botnets. So let's just kind of define some very basic characteristics. So boiling it down, there's some core characteristics of a traditional botnet. Really, usually involves some level of social engineering aspect, OS controls, inbound gateway firewall controls, AV evasion, things like that. So once compromised, they're often limited botnet capabilities. Bots are controlled through command and control, obviously, by botnet masters, the orders they receive, and they're often number in hundreds of thousands, right? So when we think of these botnets, they're generally very large in numbers. And the key point to keep in mind is almost always involves some level of system compromisation. Taking into the concept of what makes a hardware botnet a little bit different is, we're actually placing hardware. So there's always going to be this level of social engineering, but what's really different is there's no need for system compromise, right? You have the portable hardware, inexpensive hardware. And we'll get to some of the risks and limitations going forward, but really, once we have that stuff in place, we don't need to compromise the system anymore through Trojan or through some sort of malware like we do in the traditional botnets. Bots can be disposable, right? So I haven't yet played with this chip concept. It's $9, but $9 is fairly inexpensive to say Raspberry Pi, which I think goes for $35. Social engineering is likely a requirement. Obviously, system or physical proximity is obviously one of those things. Is a definite aspect to it. OS, AD, and HIDS controls really are not an issue. Botnet capabilities can be far more rich in terms of the capabilities. Exploits can be delivered remotely, or usually it's a compiled app that we usually see. Not always, but so there's greater features. There's more. There's a little bit more to it. There's scripts and apps that can be installed remotely. But one thing to keep in mind is that they're far less in numbers, right? So we're talking about hardware. We're talking about cost. We're talking about physical proximity. So there's definite characteristics that make it different from what we normally see as a traditional botnet. Overview, basically. The concept really, like I said, kind of revolves around how this is going to play into effect, what kind of impact it's going to have on businesses. And really it's just to determine, kind of play with this idea of the hardware botnet, play around with things like Raspberry Pis, and that's kind of one of the things I have in my demo today. This distributed physical network of bots, right? So all kind of controlled by command and control, and kind of going forward there, playing around with the proof of concept. Real short here, the overview of the architecture. Really kind of things that make this thing tick is bot placement, and obviously that needs to be inside or nearby the target. Operation is really going to depend on the hardware, but most of them nowadays, back when I had this concept, it was in 2010, I think it was early 2010, plug computers were kind of surging in the market, and so that was that was probably the thing that really inspired me to kind of go forward and kind of play around with this idea. Today, we have Raspberry Pi, we have Arduino, we have just a number of different platforms which we can play around with, and most of them have other capabilities like Bluetooth and Wi-Fi and Ethernet and so those kinds of things. So it makes it a much more relatable, much more easier concept to sort of put into place. And of course, there's the Tor element, which we didn't have. A little bit about the components, separated into three main components essentially. The command and control, which, like a traditional botnet, would kind of herd those bots, issue orders, and taking into account the plug bot, it actually will store bot output, which you'll see in a minute. The other component is the software itself. So there's a software component that runs on the bot on little hardware devices. It's the configuration, how it connects, where it connects, scripts, malware, apps. So, show what happened there. The scripts that can be installed remotely, apps, malware that can be delivered, and actual storage of output from these. And the third and last component would be the hardware itself. So the single board computer, Raspberry Pi, whatever your flavor. Something ideally it's ultra compact, ideally convert, and I think I've seen a number of different enclosures for Raspberry. I have one myself. That's pretty nondescript. I think there are other opportunities out there for looking online. There's a ton of options. But something that's nondescript is probably most advantageous. Of course, there's battery options as well for those that don't need to plug in to ensure power. Technical makeup. Now this is PlugBot itself. Technical makeup. What I've been playing around with is on the Raspberry Pi. I've got two of them, and you'll see those in a minute. The tech stack is Debian, Apache, MySQL. Basically, it's LAMP. And then some other things that kind of make it tick. Most predominantly would be curl and flip. Flip is, if you're not familiar, this kind of a zip sort of functionality. And then the hardware itself. It's really pretty bare bones in terms of the technical makeup. So the command and control portion is, like I said before, it's used to herd the botnets to get them to tell them what to do, job collection. So we can kick off things like a map scan remotely, or something in Metasploit, or maybe we have a custom script that we wrote in Perl. We want to deliver that, and as a result of delivering it and executing it, we can collect the output as well. It's a web-based GUI. Wrote it in CodeIgniter, SQL backend. Like I said, it's a LAMP platform, both on the configuration side of the botnet or the bot itself, and then the command and control. And the bots receive orders. You probably can't see that on the right there. Essentially, it's a web service that bots check into. And like I said, it's a LAMP service or a LAMP stack. The bot itself calls in orders, right? So ideally, it sits on the inside of the target. Right? So something that you, through social engineering means, or maybe you don't even need to use social engineering means, plug this in, get access to the network either through whatever that might be, right? So there's Ethernet, there's Wi-Fi. Get that installed so it has a valid connection, right? So that's one of the assumptions. It runs a minimalist GUI, and you'll see that in a minute. It's capable of collecting information that you basically tell it. So nmap output, whatever that might be. Logs, it does some form of primitive logging, just kind of actions. And this is, the concept for that is, when I initially started this project, I thought it might be something that these bots would be something that we would maybe not sit persistently at the target. So what we did was, the thought was, well, we might just go install it, deploy it for a certain amount of time, and then go pick it up. Nowadays, with such disposable hardware, I don't even think that's even necessary. But in the event that we want to, maybe prevent the bots from checking in, from phoning home, maybe we don't want that network access going across and out the firewall. Maybe we want to just control it, from that perspective, and we don't need to send output over the wire. Maybe we just want to store it in the bot itself. So that was one of the options that we'll see in a minute too. So, and that as well was written on CodeIgniter. A little bit about the risk and impact and limitations of kind of going through this. So I've been asked a few times, why would you want to do this? Why would you, what kind of environment does this need to run in? And my thought was, because essentially creating, and I get this from a lot of business people when we consult and so forth, why would you want to create something like this? Well, my thought is the lack of research, lack of understanding. We're not going to have any idea of what kind of IOCs, right, indicators of compromise, what are the behavior patterns, unpreparedness, that whole thing, and possibly used for evil, right, the Venezuelan effect. Well, what we usually come back to saying, this is unexplored territory. We want to be prepared for these kinds of things defensively, but also from a security researcher perspective, we want to make sure that we fully understand this, and we can't fully understand the concept without fully studying it. Limitations to the project itself. Well, there's certainly not short of limitations. Physical proximity, I think we've kind of covered that one already. So we're talking about taking physical pieces of hardware and installing them at these different locations, right? Whether it's malicious means or whatever that might be. So physical proximity is definitely one of the biggest ones. Botnet population growth, right? I think we're not talking about something that's going to be rely on system compromisation and have thousands upon thousands of these bots all over the place. It's going to be limited to the resources that we have, right? So how many Raspberry Pis we decide to disclose, or whatever that might be. The other thing is the cost of the hardware. Obviously, it's not free. So there's that cost to it, even though we may see something like chip even come down even more in cost, which is relatively inexpensive. But there's always going to be a cost factor to it. So what that means, it's not going to be very many. Right? But the underlying thing is that as a result, it's going to be very powerful. Strong physical security of the target, right? You may just not be able to get in. It just may be something that's it's just not possible for whatever reason. Strong network security, 802.1x, maybe they have rogue AP detection if it's something to do with Wi-Fi. So there's a number of different things that are assumed, and there are certain limitations, but it's still worth something. It requires us to kind of delve into it, do a little bit more studying, and kind of figure out what exactly is going on. I'm going to try and fix this. Okay, so I'm going to get now into the demonstration. This is going to be, hopefully this works out. I had some problems with. And PowerPoint crashed. Wonderful. Okay, good. So this is the login screen for the command and control. And that looks terrible, but there's I think it's just my resolution. There are charts here that you would normally see, some graphs that would kind of show a little bit about your statistics on the botnet, but this is the dashboard. I'll go through the other there's an about, there's a license, there's logs. Just to make, because we have such small real estate, there's also a setting under here. By the way, you can change your passwords, which I do recommend, to turn off help. That'll give us a little bit more real estate. So there's logs. We can check out the logs. We can check out just botnet activity. We'll see a little bit more of that. On the left side, we have it separated into 3 categories. That's bots, right? Applications, and jobs. So going from the bottom up, I'll click on Manage Bots. Obviously, we don't have anything there right now. So what we would do then is go here, and just a few pieces of information is all we need to kind of set up a bot. I'm going to do one right now. So the bot key is, and this is what this is for, this dialog, or this box up here, is to help you kind of derive these random numbers. That's all that's for. So I set a bot key, and really all that means is it's kind of like a pre-shared secret. So it's no different. It identifies this particular bot that I'm going to be setting up, and then give it a name, test. And you can ignore this for now. So essentially, I'm setting up this bot, right? I added it. I have to go over here. What is this thing? I go over here, now I'm showing all of the different components that I have associated with it. Once the bot actually phones home, it's going to update its IP address. I have some other options here I'll talk a little bit about. So now that I've got that up, I mentioned the bot configuration. This is the login screen for that particular component. So this is the bot itself. And by the way, I'm running all this on my VM Fusion. So unfortunately, it's all local, but I think it gives you the idea. So this is the configuration screen, the minimal configuration screen I had mentioned before. We have a couple of different options here. Setup, deployment. I pre-filled this already in here. Basically what that says is this URL, right? What it is where do I need to check in? Tor configuration is simply yes or no. I'm going to turn that off for now. Just save that. Bot settings. Now this is where I need to match up bot key. And like I said, that's that pre-shared secret component. So copy this information over. So these two obviously need to jive. And I'll just name this one VM bot. Right. So this is the software that would be running on a Raspberry Pi or whatever device you choose. Very simple install. Apache, LAMP, right? So that's all it is. Drop it in the folder. Set up the script to install the data, the schema, and the MySQL database. And so that's really it, right? So we have the bot name, we have the bot key. Really, the main components is the bot key itself, and then the URL where it needs to check into. And once we have that, and it's jiving with what we see in the command and control, we can go down here and test connectivity, and it shows that it was successful. So if I refresh this, remember here, every time it checks in, it should update. So now it updates the bot IP address. So if I had command and control, let's say, obviously in a cloud somewhere or over Tor, this information would be very helpful to me because I know the internal IP address feed. Going back to the bot software, there's really just minimal amount of things you can do on it. And the password obviously should be changed. And this other stuff down here, which I can get into in a little bit, is things that we'll want to do. So this deployment, what I mean by that is when we take something, we want to install it, we want to physically deploy it to our target location. There's a couple of things that we should be doing. So we want to make sure that the bot key jives up with command and control, right? That's all this, just mouse over. And this tells me that the scheduler is disabled. What that means is there's a process that runs continually, and that tells it to phone home. That's the scheduler. So the reason it was yellow is because it's saying, hey, it's not set up to phone home. You've got to do something about it. So what we want to do is start it. And so now, on its own, every minute, the bot will phone home back using this information, the URL, and bot settings, like I said, the bot key, to phone home, and it's looking for stuff, right? It's looking for orders. What should I do? And so if we go back to the deployment, this checklist, we see that it's on, it's enabled. I can verify this information. If I go back here, view logs, I'm seeing that it's actually checking in check-in bot from this IP address. Diagnostics are, utilities. There are some other things I can look at. Active jobs, I have none at this point. I can clear those out. Actually, it does minimal logging on the bot itself, so this kind of tells me it was a successful check-in. And suppress check-ins means that there's going to be a lot of check-ins. So when we do this, it's basically just kind of filters all that stuff out. That's all that is. That's all that is. Clear log table is actually what it does. Just kind of wipes out all those logs. We'll leave that for now. Manage apps. So once we install scripts or any sort of malware, whatever that is, that's where it's going to show up here. But for all intents and purposes, what people are going to be mostly using is the command and control. This is just for utility purposes. So the idea is that we go onto this particular interface merely to configure it, to get it connected, to get it working, and then we physically deploy it, and then we kind of forget about it, unless we want to pick it up and whatever. But the idea is that command and control is where it's at. So going back to command and control, right? So we see bot, it's there. We know that it's checking in. A couple log entries already. Go to manage apps, right? So this is where we would see the things that we've installed, scripts, whatever that might be. And since we have none, I'm going to install one. So right away, it gives me a list of the apps that I have installed. It's an app name. So I'm going to go over to this page here. This purposes of this demo, the Hello World. And this is out on the interwebs. This is not local. So I'm just kind of give it a more realistic. I'm going to have to put this in here while I take. So I'm going to go ahead and set this up. And the app download link is where it's going to be retrieving it from, right? So the idea is that once we have a bot physically deployed inside a target location, we can continually do things to it. We can have it download, we can have it execute. But for the purpose of this demo, I'm assuming that this bot has physically deployed somewhere else, maybe at some other company that I choose to hack. And I'm going to type in the URL. And so that's where it needs to download this from. And the download file name, right? So if I go back here, this is the particular link or file. And I'm going to go over here quick. So what I have is GitHub. Just and this is going to be published. This is actually published now, so I'll give you guys the link to download and play with Plug Out as well. But this is actually what I'm looking at. So it's this script, and it's out there in our Red Team Security account on GitHub. All it's going to do is print hello world. And what I do is I have this bash script uploaded to this area, tag.cc.dropzone, one of my domains. And going back to command and control, I'm telling it, this is the URL you need to go to, this is the file that you need to download, right? And then you also, once it's downloaded and unzipped, the app or the script inside is called hello_underworld.sh. That's what I'm telling you here. Now it's asking me, is this an interactive app? And what that means is it something that I have to, let's say, set up? For example, a reverse shell. Right? If I'm doing a reverse shell of some sort, I've got to get something prepared. I'm not awaiting output for it necessarily, like I would, let's say, an nmap scan or something like that. In this case, I am waiting for output, so it's not an interactive app. So I click Add Application, and since the bot is currently checking in, we can verify that by all these check-ins here. It's phoning home. What it's going to do is it's phoning home command and control. It's looking for apps. It's looking for basically these jobs, right? It's looking for instructions on what to do. And I'm just going to give it a minute here. The status of pending. Why don't I eat up some to from here and install. And as a result, there it is. Now it says it's installed. So it's installed on the database on the command control and subsequently on the bot itself. So theoretically, our next move is to go into jobs. Jobs is kind of just what it sounds like. It's the activity that the instructions that we get. Obviously, there's nothing here yet. Hello world test. I'm going to select the bot. Right now we only have one. Select the application. Right now there's only one. And then it's going to pre-populate the command in there as well. I'm prompted with an option here, job output. Can I save it? Now this is where I was talking earlier. The output's going to be saved in the file. If I chose this, and it's going to be locally stored on the bot. That's what I want. Normally, when it involves something that's non-interactive, I'm going to want to upload it. What that means, it's going to show up here in command and control. So I click Add, go back to Manage Jobs, right? So if I'm going to go over here and tell you a little bit about what's going on. So pending means it's waiting for the job to be picked up. So the bot is polling, it's phoning home. Nothing's happening just yet. The next option would be, the next status would be running job. So this means that the bot picked it up, recognized that it needs something to do, and then it actually starts doing some level of execution on the bot side. So we can watch, this particular table is Ajax driven, so it constantly queries the database. So we can see this should change on its own, unlike the Manage Apps page. So what's happening now is, there you can see it up, and received. Maybe getting some level of output back. And that's what we expect to see in this one. If it was something like a reverse shell, the output, then it would merely show this status. If I had chose to save that information to the bot itself, then I would naturally see this last. Still, right now, currently running, and again, there's that window of about a minute to 2 minutes that it needs to first pick up the job and then run it. Now it just changed to output received. So what I should see, going back to our script that we just used, is just hello world. So if I go here, click on that, there we see it. Pretty exciting. So next one I wanted to demo was something a little bit more complex. but not by much. And this is, let's add an app. It's another one. We're going to install it on the test bot. This is, I'm going to get IP addresses, right? So that's something that's pretty common. Let's say we have to put in a bot, and we want to get the lay of the land. We don't know kind of what's around us. We want to get the IP addresses. We want its IP address, right? If it's DHCP, we want to get the external IP address where it's coming out from the firewall. Again, this is not an interactive app because we expect output. Put that in there. Go back to manage apps. And while that's running, I just kind of want to show you real quick what it kind of looks like as things. So here we have a check-in log file, our log entry that says it received a job. Looks like it displayed one, received it, received output. So we kind of get an idea of kind of the activity that's going on there. We'll go back here and manage apps. This looks like it's still running. So I'll show you real quickly what this does. This is Hello World. So this one is, again, pretty basic. Run some, just does a wget. So I have we have a page on our company website that just displays the IP address you're coming from. And this next command, all that does is runs ifconfig and outputs it. So we expect to get, when we do this, is now it's installed. When I run the job, get IP addresses, I should see both the internal, that doesn't have the argument, so I'm going to upload it to here. So when I run this, I should get where, so it's deployed at the physical location. I should get its IP address where it's coming from, the external IP address of the firewall, and its internal IP address too. Just in case, we go back down here. On occasion, the bot, if there's trouble with it getting its local IP address, this doesn't populate. If it's not able to grab its IP, the internal IP address, this will display as 0.0.0.0. So running the get IP addresses script will help dramatically in determining, getting a lay of the land in terms of where the bot is installed, its network surroundings. So now it's running. And this is kind of the mantra for all the jobs going forward. There's a certain command, there's a certain polling feature that runs, and there we go. So if we click on it, we know that our external IP address is that. And if you look internally, this. So I'm running in VM Fusion in the protected environment, so it's not going to display its IP address because I have it as a 172. Otherwise, if it was a valid, it was connected, through. If it wasn't kind of tunneling through my IP address, it would display a valid IP, but that's natted through my IP. So anyway, that gives you an idea of the lay of the land going forward. The next one I'm going to show is Nmap. So let's go here. Add this pot. So what I'm putting there is, when you see me put this in, it's kind of a reminder, and we'll see this in a little bit. The reason I put arcs in there is because that's essentially what we'll need to in order to kick this off, and that these arguments, right? Some level of parameters that we need to run. So I'm going to wait for that to get installed. Let's still take a look at what it is. And again, this is openly available through just. I thought I had it in here. Here it is. So what happens is there are some requirements that needs to be installed, and what we could do is we could expand the script to make sure that we could even script the install. But for the sake of this demo, we're assuming it's already installed. And so what it does is really just creates a symbolic link to where the Nmap executable is actually stored. And then again, you'll have to change as needed if it happens to be a different folder. Let's go back here, let's refresh, and let's install. Let's add a quick job here. So when I select Nmap, you'll see the arcs thing comes up just to remind me that I need to put something else in there. Naturally, I want to upload. I want the output to be displayed here. So again, there's several of these scripts, and I'll have a link to that once we're done. I'm not going to go through all of these, but the Nmap one is something I think will be pretty useful. Only going to do I have a SynFlood one, HP or HPing. There's the reverse shell, which we'll kind of end with. And I can show that a little bit. So the reverse shell one, which we'll demo here, is pretty easy. It's in Perl, and you can download it. And so it's running. So what we expect from this one, just like we did for these others that have output, is the results of the Nmap running on the local host. So what it's doing is it's running Nmap on the bot itself. And of course, once we do get IP addresses and get a valid IP from here, we understand the network topology. We have more information. We could launch an Nmap scan on the network instead of just local host. Obviously, it doesn't really do us much good. But for the sake of this demo, we're running it on local host. And once that comes back with stuff for us, I can show you that. So it's running still. Let me show you one other thing while that's going. So they have the change password help setting, which basically kind of gives pointers here and there. There's this other setting here, it's called stop bot. What that means is kind of a kill switch. So you have bots running out there checking in from various places. Let's say you want it to stop, right? It's physically deployed somewhere else, but you don't know how to make it stop, make it shut up, stop it. I don't want, maybe someone's suspicious, I don't know. Whatever reason you may have, you can remotely turn this on or select this, say stop this bot. And what it does is when the bot checks in, it says, okay, it's a kill switch. I need to stop. I need to quit doing all my activity, and it won't check in anymore. It'll just continue to run until you decide to either retrieve it or maybe it's something that's disposable. But that's kind of the kill switch option there. We're going to think about possibly even, because some data may be saved to that bot, maybe something that could possibly implicate whoever the person that placed it. Thinking about implementing some sort of, self-destruct. Maybe it wipes itself, something like that. But for now, it stops it from phoning home. So we got the output back, and there it is. So we're going to Nmap scan on the local host. So I'm retrieving that information remotely. The last one I wanted to show you is the reverse shell. So again, we go through the same motions here. And if this were not on my local machine, we would see, and this obviously now we know this isn't an interactive app, meaning I've got to do something to prepare for this connection. So if I go down to this guy, so we have NCAT sitting on port 444. That's another. So go back here. I do indicate that yes, it's an interactive app. Again, I've got the arguments there so that when it does install and I want to run a job on it, might be okay. Not only do I have to indicate the port and the IP address I want to run this on. Let me just. So I mentioned earlier before, while that's installing that app, I mentioned that there was a capability for Tor. And so this is the Tor implementation. It's slow. It's paired to my phone right now, but so this is live. The command and control right now is running at my house on a Raspberry, one of the versions, I can't remember which one. And it happens to be, no, it's a plug computer. Yeah, it's one of those Shiba plug computers. So it's running on that, plugged in. Just uploaded the software and again, imported the script for the database. So it's a .onion. We know that the command and control is hidden. And in order for the bots to check it, they have to be configured for Tor. So in their configuration, which I'll show you now, this one here. If I show you here, that's all we need to do. Fill this guy in, and this one as well. Save it. And this one is not configured so it's not configured to check it. So I'm going to start it, tell it to phone home. Whoops. And this is slow, obviously, it's going through Tor. So I'm telling it to check in right now. This is something you would do before you actually deploy it to the target location. It says check-in was successful. If I go back to my Tor browser, I go to logs. Hopefully it doesn't take all day. Now, it's all that I check in. It's configured as check VM bot, which is what this one is. So here we can see, and when it checks in from Tor, it usually gives it a local host. It doesn't give you the IP address, which is another reason why it's advantageous to use or have scripts in there that actually will get the IP addresses. And this one's in use, right? So I've got several apps on here. I've done a few jobs along the way, and map against a certain host. And map on one of the networks that gave me back this info. So, all right, going back to our initial screen here, waiting for the reverse shell to install. going to tell it that we're going to do a reverse shell. And after we've chosen the bot, it gives us the list of applications. The reverse shell is the one we want. And my IP address. Okay, I think I told it 4444. So I have my, yep, so it's listening there. And once I select the reverse shell, remember I indicated when I first installed it, it already comes back with interactive, there's no input to say, so I don't have any choice to do anything else. And I want to do this now, so I just go ahead and click on job. Back here, specifically the status. And again, there's that polling feature that communicates phone's home to command and control. Waiting for that. Since it's initiated, meaning since we don't anticipate any output, it's kind of a waiting game now. It's right now there's two processes. Like I said, there's this check-in and then there's a run job. The check-in process just happened, which means it phoned home, it saw that there was instructions, downloaded them, imported into the bot database, and left it there. The second job, the second process that runs, again, by the way, this is all on the bot itself. The second process that runs is the run job process. What it does, it looks for things in the database that are ready to run, gets all the information that it received from command and control. It's now in the local MySQL database, and it formulates what things it needs to do going forward. And that process runs every minute. It's configurable, but there we go. So now, so now this is the bot itself. I got a reverse shell back to my system. I can run nmap. Now, the good thing or the cool thing to do is to maybe install one of these on. If I go back to my Tor browser, you can see my bots that I have running. I actually have two Raspberry Pis, and one happens to be running the PwnPy. If you guys are familiar with that, it has a bunch of tools, preloaded. It's a nice little GUI. It's all fits on a nice little SD card, which is great. So it's all preloaded for me. What I could do is leverage all the tools that are already installed there. Simply install Apache, MySQL, and once I have a reverse shell, I can go at it from there, and it's not on this particular one, but I can navigate to the pentest folder and run as many tools as I feel like it, and all done remotely again. And that really concludes. That was really my presentation. Again, this is a proof of concept that I wanted to kind of introduce. It is open source. It is freely available. I would love for anyone interested that's familiar with PHP, specifically CodeIgniter, to kind of play around with this, help contribute. Because I'm not a programmer. I'll state that right now. There are better and more efficient ways of doing things. I'm just a security guy. But I would love for those to be able to contribute somehow on Git and help us out that way. That's all I have. Thank you.